Welcome to In Brief series. Today, I'm going to talk about John Dryden, political influence. Dryden always was in favor of authority and of peace from civil strife, and consequently, when disorders broke out upon Cromwell's death, he, with the rest of the nation, welcomed the return of Charles II. He celebrated the king's return with his poem of Asteria Redux, 1660, in which he already showed his mastery of the rhymed couplet. Then followed his poems on the coronation, 1661, and to Lord Clarendon, 1662, to Dr. Charlton, 1663, to the Duchess of York, 1665, and Annis Maripilus, 1667. His great prose essay on dramatic poesy appeared in 1668. Meantime, in 1662, Dryden had been elected to the Royal Society, and on the 1st of December 1663, he was married to Lady Elizabeth Howard, eldest daughter of the Earl of Berkshire. His dramatic career. In 1662, he began his dramatic career with The Wild Gallant, a comedy of humors influenced by Spanish sources. In 1663 appeared The Rival Ladies, a tragicomedy, also from a Spanish model. To this, Dryden prefixed the first of the famous prefaces in which he laid down his principles of dramatic criticism. The Indian Emperor, a heroic play, his first original drama, appeared in 1665. In 1667, he produced The Maiden Queen, a comedy in which some blank verse seen alongside of the rhymed couplet in prose. Sir Martin Marall, a prose comedy based on Liturgy of Molière and an adaptation of The Tempest with Davinon. The Mock Astrologer, 1668, was an animation of Lufian astrology of Thomas Cunet, influenced by Moliere's De Piamero. About this time, Dryden entered into an agreement with the King's Theatre Company. According to this, he was to produce 3 plays a year, for which he was to receive 1 1/4 shares out of a total of 12 3/4. In the winter of 1668 to 1669, Tyrannic Love or the Royal Martyr, a rhymed heroic tragedy, was played. And in 1670, his greatest heroic tragedy, the first and second parts of Almanzor and Almahid, or the Conquest of Granada. Why is All for Love considered a masterpiece? This is Dryden's masterpiece, a play based on the story of Antony and Cleopatra, which he wrote to satisfy his own standards. It's a play worthy of comparison with Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra, surpassing it in unity of time and motive, and in the part of Vinicidus, adding one of the great characters of the English drama. What is the importance of Absalom and Ashitobel? In November 1681, Dryden began in the first part of Absalom and Ashitobel, the series of satires in the rhymed couplet, which placed him at the head of English satirical poets. Absalom and Ashitobel was the most important literary expression of the party which prevented the exclusion of the Duke of York from the succession to the throne. It is also one of the greatest of English satires, especially in its portraiture of the characters of the Duke of Monmouth and the Earl of Shaftesbury, both of whom the author has represented allegorically in the title of the poem. What is the importance of religio laicae? John Dryden was converted to Catholicism in 1686. This step was the natural outcome of his investigation into theology, the first result of which had been Religio Laicae. This poem, while a defense of the Church of England, showed a desire for an infallible guide in religious matters and indicates the direction in which Dryden's thoughts were turning. The accession of James gave him the additional incentive of belonging to the king's religion, a powerful motive in Dryden's case, for he was a devoted adherent to authority in the church and state. Dryden was accused of time serving by his enemies, but this charge is easily disproved by his perseverance in his conversion during the next reign, when he refused even to dedicate his translation of Virgil to William III, lest he should be suspected of denying his religious or political principles. What is the importance of the hind and the panther? Dryden published in April 1687 The Hind and the Panther, in some ways his most important work. It is divided into three parts. The first describes the different sects in England under the allegorical figures of beasts. The second deals with the controversy between the hind, the Catholic Church, and the panther, the Church of England. The third continues this dialogue and develops personal and doctrinal satire. In this poem, Dryden succeeded in the difficult task of rendering argument in verse interesting. Especially noteworthy are lines 499 to 555, second part, in which he describes the foundation and the authority of the church, and lines 235 to 250, third part, in which he defends his own course of action. In 1688, Dryden translated the life of Saint Francis Xavier from the French, and in 1682 of Pierre Dominique Bouhours Séguier, and when an heir to the throne was born, he celebrated the event in his poem of Britannia Rediviva. What do you know about Dryden's translations? With his remarkable power of adaptation, Dryden now gave his attention to another literary form, that of translation. He had before this, in 1680, made some translations of Ovid, and in the miscellanies of 1684 and 1685, and of 1693 and 1694, there are specimens of Ovid, Horace, Homer, Theocritus, and Lucretius, which together with his more complete translations of Virgil and Juvenal make a total of about 30,000 lines. In July 1697, the Pastorals, the Georgics, and the Aeneid of Virgil were published, and the edition was sold off in about 6 months. Meanwhile, in 1692, Dryden had composed an elegy on Eleanora, Countess of Abington, for which he received 500 guineas. About this time also, he wrote his famous address to Congreve on the failure of the double dealer. In 1699, at the close of his life, he published his fables. This volume contained 5 paraphrases of Chaucer, 3 of Boccaccio, besides the first book of the Iliad and Alexander's Feast, perhaps his greatest lyric poem, written in 1697 for a musical society in London, which celebrated St. Cecilia's Day. Dryden had also written the Ode for the Celebration in 1687 by the same society. Dryden didn't long survive the publication of his last book. He died of inflammation caused by gout and was buried in Westminster Abbey. What do you think of Dryden's position in the history of English literature? Dryden's position in the history of English literature is one of supreme importance. He brought the rhymed couplet as a means of satire to a brilliancy and a point never surpassed by before or since his time. As a close and logical reasoner in verse, he has never been equaled. As a dramatist, he did much good work, and in some cases, as in All for Love or Dunstan, he achieved supreme distinction as a lyrist. He has left many exquisite songs and at least two of the finest odes in the language. As a translator and adapter, he ranks high, while as a prose writer, he not only produced a body of criticism, which established him as one of the greatest of English critics, but he also clarified English prose and marked the way for future development. As a man, he shared the faults of his time, but the scandals heaped upon him by his enemies have fallen away under critical examination, and the impression remains of a brave, honest Englishman, earnest in every cause he championed, who loved to praise who befriended him, and who could suffer reverses in silence and dignity. The standard edition of Dryden's works is that edited by Walter Scott in 18 volumes in 1808 and re-edited by George Sandbury, Edinburgh, 1882 to 1893. This is the end of John Dryden. See you in the next episode.